Hello, everyone. On behalf of Congregation Haskalah, welcome. My name is, forgive me, there we go. My name is Liz Fear, and I have a few pieces of housekeeping before we get started. We will be keeping everyone muted throughout and ask that you hold your questions to the end when we will call on you to unmute yourself, or you can put them in the chat box. I'd like to introduce you to our host today, Armin Langer. On top of being Haskalah's student rabbi, Armin is in his penultimate year at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College and is also the rabbinic intern at the Center for Jewish Ethics. And I'll turn it over to you, Armin.
Thank you, Liz. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome on behalf of Haskalah as well. I have the pleasure to introduce you to Student Rabbi Shoshana Nambi, who is our guest speaker today. Shoshana grew up in Uganda. She studied business administration at Mbale International University, and she's also trained as an HIV community educator and counselor. She has been a student rabbi for the past years at the Hebrew Union College, and she's living currently in New York together with her 12-year-old daughter, Emuna. Shoshana teaches Hebrew school at Bnei Jeshurun and serves as student rabbi for North Fork Reform Synagogue in New York. And I had the pleasure to listen to Shoshana speak before at a different event, and I was totally amazed by you, Shoshana, your lecture. And I felt that I have to bring this lecture to Congregation Haskalah, my congregation too. And I'm very happy that so many of you came today to listen to Shoshana and to discuss with Shoshana about her experiences in Uganda and maybe also her experiences in the US. So thank you for being here. And Shoshana, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Armin. Thank you. And I always feel like when we have a Torah study, we have a blessing before we study any text. And when we meet and gather, I feel like we also have a blessing, and that's in terms of a song, Hine Matov Umanaim. It's how good it is that we sit together and talk together and as a people. So I'm going to start by singing Hine Matov in my local language in the Ugandan tune. It's both in Hebrew and in Luganda. You can sing with me in Hebrew. You have zero obligation of singing in Luganda. But please follow along. Hine matovu umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matovu umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Laba bwekulyo kulungi bwekusanyusa Uganda okutula laba bwekulyo kulungi bwekusanyusa Uganda okutula. So thank you. I want to say thank you so much again for inviting me today to share with you about my Jewish community of Uganda and my experiences and my journeys and travels through rabbinic school. I am going to do that through sharing a slideshow of pictures with you and mostly pictures from home. I'm going to try and share my screen now. Let's see how this usually works. So I'm hoping it will work today too. Okay. So the map is just, we probably know where Uganda is, but the map is just a reminder, and also to point to where my Jewish community, the majority of the Jews are in Uganda, mostly in Eastern Uganda. And if you know about Uganda, about the Entebbe airport and so many things that connect to the Jewish people and connect to Israel, there's also other news. We have a fully a very flourishing Jewish community in Uganda too. And there was also Chabad opened in Uganda, like maybe I think 5 years ago. So there's a lot of Jewish activities and growth in Uganda. And so this is my grandfather, whom I grew up with, and this is my daughter when she was 4 years old. I'll make it full screen. And so I grew up and as my grandparents were both subsistence farmers, and we grew crops, beans, maize, and we grew almost all the food that we ate. And we lived 3 minutes away, 3 minutes walk away from the congregation, from the synagogue. And some of my childhood fond memories, memories of community leaders coming to my house and to everybody's house to gather kerosene lamps so we can have enough light to celebrate Shabbat and other Jewish holidays on the eve together. And there was also, because nobody had clocks and watches in their home, there was also sounding of a big drum. Somebody used to sound a drum so people can remember that it's time for Shabbat and drop their hose and everything, their garden tools, so they can come, they can stop and be ready for Shabbat. So that is my grandfather. I lost my grandmother maybe I think 5 years ago, and this is the area where I grew up in. This is in Eastern Uganda, and the synagogue is just around the corner on the right side, and this is the village. And it's not a typical, it's not just a Jewish village. We have Christian and Muslim and everybody else living in the same village, and we share resources, we share water wells and schools and everything else. And we also have extended families. So that means some of my close my close family is Jewish, and some of my relatives are not, they're Christians and Muslims. And so how do we have a Jewish community in Uganda in the first place? So the Abayudaya Jewish community is now 100 years old, and it's a community that converted to Judaism about in 1919. And it started with one person. His name was Semeika Kungulu, and he was a military commander. He married the princess of one of the biggest kingdom of the Buganda kingdom in Uganda, and he worked with the British. He was also a landman who was also a spiritual seeker, and he used to read different books. And as we know, one of the gifts that he received from the British were the Christian Bible, which he read. And because he worked with them, they promised him a lot of things. They promised to make him the king of Eastern Uganda and to make him all these great and wonderful things. And when that did not happen, he fell out with the British, and he resigned and lived in Eastern Uganda, where I am from. And so he lived with his close friends and all the people. He was a very charismatic leader who had people around him. And he just settled in his home and started reading and studying the Bible. And he did, after studying, he had the most Jewish response to reading the Bible. And he had so many questions. He was like, why don't we celebrate Shabbat? Why don't we do circumcision? Why don't we do this and this? And some of his friends who knew about these things told him that that's what Jewish people do. We don't do that as Christians. And he had been moving around religions. He was once, he identified as an Amalekite, or like he had several religions that he was trying out and moving around. So he finally said, if that's what Jewish people do, I want to be Jewish. So he converted himself to Judaism with no knowledge or without meeting any Jewish person in the world. And just because that's what Jewish people do. And this was a long time ago, maybe around 1920. And later on, because he had all this influence with the British and he met people who were trading and going through Kampala, he met a young man who was Jewish. We only know his name as Joseph. but he was a trader and he lived in Kampala. He was apparently from Yemen or Israel. We are not very sure. We were just, I think everybody knew Joseph is a Jewish name and nobody would doubt that. So Joseph came and stayed with Kakungulu and told him about ritual slaughter and told him about kashrut and so many other things that he knew. And so unfortunately, Semeka Kungulu died in 1928. And when he died, because he was the leader, he was there and he had a lot of resources of money and land, the community really reduced in number. People went back to being Christians and Muslims and other religions. And some people stayed around and continued to practice whatever Semeka Kungulu was doing, what they were doing. He built a temple in his home and they would just sit down and read the Torah and read Psalms and read all these things. And one of these people was my great-grandfather. So they continued and we had the next group of leaders, including Rabbi, this is Semeika Kungulu. This was the guy who started Judaism. And this is Rabbi Samson Mugombe. Maybe he will come up in a, oh, so this is Semeika Kungulu's home. And around there's another house where he's buried inside the house with his family, because that's the traditional burying of Buganda Kingdom royals, or people who were in the elite classes. They were buried within their homes. In Kampala, if you go, there's a really big burial place for kings and queens, and they're buried in like huts, which have like, you know, they're called shrines. So that he was given that kind of royal burying too. So when he died, he was Jewish, but most of his family converted back. Actually, right now we don't have, we have like one young man from his family who is still Jewish. So Judaism carried on with other people who were his friends, and they were from different villages. So that means they made different communities in whatever villages they were. This is Rabbi Samson Mugombe. We called him Rabbi. He was a very great teacher, and he's also the grandfather of our rabbi that we have in the community right now. And he taught all his kids and grandkids. And when he died, there were his grandkids. We have one of them is the headmaster of the school and the rabbi. There were so many people to take over the community. And around that time also, between 1971 and 1978, there was the rise of Idi Amin, who was one of the dictators of Uganda, and he banned Judaism and other religions except for Islam and Christianity. He tolerated the Christians because they were the majority, but he really wanted to make Uganda a Muslim country. And his relationship with Israel and everything else, I think you remember it from the ride on Entebbe. So there was really fear in the community, and people prayed in hiding. There is a cave where people used to hide and pray. And one time people were arrested for building a sukkah, and they paid bribes of goats and land. They were, by their neighbors and the local officials. So on Pesach, which is coming up, the Ugandan Jewish community celebrates has like a double celebration, because on the eve of Pesach, that's when Idi Amin was overthrown. And so it's a double celebration in Uganda for the Jewish community, and people talk about their experiences during Idi Amin, and everybody, we celebrate in a different way. So after Idi Amin was overthrown, before Idi Amin, the Jewish community had some connection with other Jews, and that was mostly with Israel. So Israel had a lot of diplomatic and businesses going around, mostly in Kenya and Uganda. And I think that's why they were also involved in building the airport. That's why it was easy for them to do the rescue. And so the ambassador actually of Israel to Kenya came to the community and visited, and used to send like a lot of books and so many other things. And that was cut off because of Idi Amin. So after Idi Amin was overthrown, a group of young people sort of ways to bring people back together. People were in fear, and some people had converted back to being Christians and Muslims again. So what they did is they sat down and they modeled kind of living that was like the kibbutzim. They modeled it on what they had learned about kibbutz in Israel. And so they joined a group of young people who and composed music because they knew that the young people would be attracted by singing and music. Everybody loved to dance and sing. So they composed all this wonderful music, some translated from Hebrew to Luganda, and some of them sang like the Hinematov sang all in Luganda and in Hebrew, and so many other songs. And so they stayed around the synagogue and made bricks and built a synagogue. But they were still looking to see if they could find connections with other Jews and other Jewish communities. And one of the nearest Jewish community that they could go to was a community in Kenya, which is a modern Orthodox community for expats who live in Kenya, from England, from America, and from other places. So they attempted to go there, and they were, rejected several times, and they insisted. And one time, the two men from the community went, and they were seated in the back of the synagogue. And this young man from America who was volunteering in Kenya saw them and came and sat with them and talked to them. And they said, "We are Jews and we're from Uganda." And so he was very interested, and he came back with them and lived with them for a month. And when he came back to America, he wrote an article, I think for Hillel, I'm not exactly sure, but he was a student at Brown University. And that's how actually the whole connection of the Jewish community started. He connected it to organizations like Kulanu that work with emerging and isolated communities around the world. And so in 2002, the community did an official conversion with a Beit Din of rabbis, of Reform and conservative rabbis. The community wanted to do an Orthodox conversion, but there were no Orthodox rabbis. Every rabbi that the community approached did not want to do the conversion, so they did a Reform and conservative conversion with 5 Beit Din rabbis from the US and from Israel. And I think for selfish reasons, but I'm happy that that's the way things happened, because I wouldn't be here maybe probably studying to be a rabbi. So I'm going to share. So we have in the community, this is the new built synagogue. This is my community's synagogue, and it was donated by somebody through Bechor Ashon, which is also an organization that works with my community. And the community has about 2,000 people spread out in different villages. We have right now about 9 synagogues in different communities. And we have 2 Orthodox communities, because during the Beit Din and everything else, there are some people who really wanted to be more traditional. And so they broke off, and we have 2 Orthodox communities. So I always joke that even in Uganda, we have a synagogue that we don't go to. And then the rest are conservative communities. We have me, I'm studying through the Reform movement, and we have another rabbinic student from one of the other villages studying through the Jewish renewal movement. And so before then, the community was just Jewish. There was no movements and everything. So, but with the connection, and the rabbi went to study at the conservative, at Ziegler, which is a conservative seminary. So all these branches, but the community works together, and almost everybody's relatives and know each other. We're from the same villages. So even if somebody's in the Orthodox community, if there's a wedding, everybody goes, everybody knows each other. We all know each other. So that's also one of the beautiful things. So this is one of the villages. Each village is different from the other. Some villages are more remote than others. And every village has a synagogue. And there are also there are challenges in the community of water and education and, malaria and typhoid. But the community has also been working really hard on education, on health. We have a community health center. We have 3 Jewish schools right now, 2 primary schools and 1 high school. And the kids who come from far, from different villages, come and board and live at the school, where they study Judaism and Hebrew and other subjects that are recommended by the government. And in these schools, we also have Christian and Muslim kids join. They don't have to take the Hebrew classes or the Jewish classes, but they join. And so the community, it has a good relationship with its neighbors and with everybody. So when you come to my community in Uganda, a lot of things are similar. A lot of things are the same. We build the sukkahs, we celebrate Hanukkah, we celebrate all the holidays. Maybe some of the differences would be we do a lot of our own melodies for all the or most of the songs. For Kabbalat Shabbat, there's, we have Lechadodi, everything's with a Ugandan melody that is more infused with like Afro versions and drums and everything. And maybe the food also would be different. We also have people from different places in Uganda. In my community, people speak within the same community. People speak about 7 languages, and we have people from northern Uganda who wouldn't understand anything that I would say. So there's also, we speak English and Swahili. English and Swahili are the national languages of Uganda. This is Rabbi Gershom, and you can see he on his ordination, he was given such a grand welcome because everybody was so happy that this is 2008 for having a rabbi. These are some of the women of the community. So in the community before the rabbi actually went to study, even though the community was more progressive, women were not doing services or leading services or doing bat mitzvah or anything. It was more of a men's role in the synagogue. But a lot of things changed when the rabbi came back, and he brought stories of studying with wonderful women chevrutas and teachers and all these things. It took a while. Even now, when you come in the big synagogue, there are people still sitting on different directions. They don't want to cross over, but the community is very egalitarian, and the women are chairpersons and leading several committees. This was a bat mitzvah that these women practiced to do for themselves. This is another bat mitzvah for Devorah. And this is one of the high schools that we have. Actually, it's the only high school, but one of the schools. And these schools have been possible through the help of Kulanu and other organizations in the US and friends, because for kids and everybody else, because a lot of people before, actually some people still now are subsistence farmers and grow crops and for food and all these things. And it's been a challenge sending their kids to school, especially when they have to pay or when they can afford tuition. The kids also need uniform and books and everything else. So there's been some help from other Jewish organizations around the world. And there are youth groups in the community. This is you can see a cute picture of young boys. I think this was like a USY kind of coordination or group, but there's always a big celebration in January of music. So it's like a big music festival for all the different Jewish communities come together, and they do a competition in music and in celebration and dance. And people bring together all the foods and the cultures from other different tribes in Uganda. This is it's one of the communities that is actually really growing very fast. My friends and I started this community in Kampala at the university. It's mostly for young people who go to university to stay connected home, to do tefillah and to do activities together. And so it's been growing, and it's included people in Kampala who are traveling, or people who are working from other places, from the US, from Israel, from Europe, who are working in Kampala to join the community. And it's also the community, because of education, people go to Kampala, go to the capital city for education, and it's very hard to come back in the community, especially because there are not so many job opportunities for them. So they stay, some people stay around in the city, and so they're forming this other growing community in the capital city. So this is a picture that was taken in 2018, and it was the first birthright group of these very excited, as you can see on their faces, young people to Israel. And this had been a really long time coming, and the community has been applying, and for young people to go to on birthrights or Masa programs to Israel. And this happened, and it was such a big success. But the Jewish community actually in 2008, the Jewish Agency of Israel came out and recognized the Abayudaya Jewish community as Jewish. So the Jewish Agency has the ability to recommend to the Interior Ministry who is Jewish if people want to make Aliyah. And so 5 young people from my community 5 years ago went on a Masa program. They were accepted and given grants to go on Masa program. And, while they were there, 4 people came back to Uganda, and 1 person stayed and applied to volunteer at the kibbutz and did all these programs. And as he was there, he decided to make Aliyah because he was already admitted as a Masa participant. That means you're Jewish and all these things. And when he applied, the government asked him to leave immediately or he would risk being deported. So that has been a case up to actually recently that has been in the High Court for him to be recognized as Jewish. And I guess that, recognizing him would mean recognizing the entire Abayudaya community as Jewish, which maybe that's the threat, and that's we really don't know, but there's a lot going on, and we hope that will be resolved. In terms of the community, does the community want to go and live in Israel? No, because I can see young people maybe who go on programs and they get connected and they want to stay maybe for a different life or for something else, or maybe they just got connected to love to stay in Israel. But the entire community, people have land and they have animals and they have so many things going on. Like my parents, my grandparents, or my people, my parents' generations would never think of moving somewhere else. But I feel like I think the opportunity should be accorded to them, just like it is for any other Jew around the world. So I included this picture because it's just to show you how many. Uganda has about 56 languages, and people come from different areas, and there are always different celebrations and so much going on. One of these on the left is a circumcision ceremony, which is not at 8 days, but rather for young men, and it's kind of like an initiation ceremony. And a lot of people from this tribe are also members of the community. So it's always, sometimes there's some conflict between cultures in Uganda and the Jewish traditions. And well, I don't know anybody who was chosen to do this circumcision ceremony. Most people, circumcise their boys at 8. But there are a few other traditions that, have people choose what, like people choose between being Jewish and being, belonging to a tribe and some other cultures. But there's also so much beauty that comes with it in terms of people having different traditions and different foods and different languages, and just the community itself is very diverse in terms of the people and the cultures. So I'm going to stop here to stop sharing for now, but I really wanted to take a minute to just talk about more about the music of the community, just for maybe another minute. So the music that I talked about, there was a rabbi who came from, he was working at Tufts. He was the director of Hillel at Tufts University. He's also music, I want to say, I don't know what the name, oncologist or something. There's a title, he's I will find it, but his name is Rabbi Jeffrey Summit. He came into the community and recorded this music that the young people did together when they were living on the kibbutz. So, this was supposed to bring people together, and he recorded it and he brought it to the US and recorded it actually with the Smithsonian folk music studios, I think. And so the music was nominated for the Grammys. It was such a really nice moment, but the community did not know what the Grammys are, but now we understand what that means. Well, I don't know if it means much even now, but the rabbi used this opportunity to fundraise for money using the music and his talks and everything to send money. And he's been sending money to the community for a really long time to send people to university. And there's a very big, there's a university scholarship. And that's how I got to go to university, because otherwise I would never have afforded to go to university. But the community also speaks about this as that they just said music saved the community. It saved the young people. It saved when, you know, people traveled. The rabbi traveled with his brother the first time to come to the US, and they went to a congregation and they were singing the music from the community. They were just in tears and so happy that the music had traveled to other Jewish communities. So I am going to try and play one of the songs, Lecha Dodi, but I'm playing the recorded song. All right. Just give me a moment. It takes some time even up to now. Please let me know if you can hear it. Okay, so just wanted to share just a little bit, and I wanted, in the Hebrew, people can pronounce Hebrew perfectly well, but the Hebrew and the pronunciation is also is also influenced by the local languages. And for example, when we speak, we always have a vowel at the end of every word. It doesn't matter whether it has a vowel or not. Like for example, we'll say in good, we'll say gudu, or hine matov will be hine matovu. So you might hear that in most of the songs, and in Hebrew, especially the ones that were done like maybe 20 years ago. So I'm going to open up for questions in case somebody has, and maybe Liz, if you can see something in the chat, you can let me know. Thank you.
If anyone would like to unmute, you can. Oh, Sabra, there you go. Go ahead.
Hi there. It's beautiful and it's exciting, and you are beautiful and exciting, and welcome. And what I would like to know is the religious culture before this community converted in the beginning of the century. Was it an indigenous religion that is now endangered? In other words, is the becoming Jewish threatening an indigenous culture survival? Are there enough of those people maintaining the tradition that they will not die out as a culture on earth?
That's a really good question. So people were different things before converting to Judaism. And so Jews, like the Jewish community is only 2,000 people out of 45 million people in Uganda, and I think more than that right now. So Uganda is also really diverse in terms of religions. We have the Baha'i, we have Hindu, we have almost everybody, Christians and Muslims and everything, and we have African traditionalists, people who identify as African in the African traditional religion, and we have so much, and it's a choice. Uganda, we have our president for over 32 years, and personally, I'm not so happy about that. But one of the good things that this president or this government has been is for religious freedoms, and so people have the freedom to be whatever they want in terms of religious practice, and I think that's a beautiful thing. The community is very proud and happy to be Jewish, and proud to have both to be actually Ugandan Jews. So that means we still have a lot of Ugandan cultures and traditions, and when there's a burial in the community, whether it's a Jewish burial, African traditionalist burial, Muslim burial, everybody goes. The only difference is who officiates the burial, but everybody goes. There's so many traditions that people celebrate together in the community, and weddings and traditional. We have, like, people can choose. We usually have two weddings. There's a traditional African wedding that happens before the wedding, the Jewish wedding, or the Christian wedding if you want to. So people choose. Some people do both of them, and some people do one, whichever way. So I think I'm just happy that there's religious freedom and people can choose what they want to be at this point.
I have two questions, if I can go next, Liz. So one is, and I did post something in the chat, that I first became aware of the Abayudaya and Kulanu in 2003 when a member of your tribe was here in Philadelphia and spoke. The growth seems to have been tremendous since then. And I'm curious if that growth just came from new generations coming up, or through conversion, or through a mix. That's one question. My other question is, I just forgot it. Just answer the one.
Okay, if you remember it, please get back to us. So the growth has been mostly through family, through birth and families. I mentioned before that we have big extended families, and some of the people who have converted to Judaism have been part of the family, like being extended members, maybe people who live, we have people live in anybody's house. We have, like, the headmaster of Hadassah School has adopted, like maybe 30 kids in his home, and several people. So some of these are kids from relatives, and some people who are uncles and aunties, and we almost all know each other. So that has been mostly, and there have been, like, updated conversions in 2000, and I think there was one in 2008 for people who had been with the community, who had been already members and practicing and being Jewish, but who had not converted before in 2002. In 2002, maybe I think the conversion was like for maybe 500 people. So they've been, and I'm sure there are more people because, there are more updated babies than we've been saying 2000 for a really long time. I'm sure the number is more than that. Yeah, and so there is also a Kenyan community, a Kenyan, like, for Kenyan nationals, citizens. I don't know how to say this one, but I think they belong to the community, the Orthodox community in Kenya, but they broke off, and it's a small community. And when they broke off, they wanted to do conversions, but they were, misled, and they did conversions with Messianic rabbis. I think some rabbis from the US, they had no idea, and they came and converted everybody. Like, it's mainly one family in Kenya who have, created just their own community. And then when they realized, then they read about, they read about that there's a Jewish community in Uganda. So they have been sending all their kids to the Jewish schools, and they came to Uganda, and they started with the rabbi, and they did a conversion later on. So there's a small, tiny Jewish community, which is like part of the Abayudaya community in Kenya too.
I do remember the other question. with the growth and having all these synagogues and different groups in Uganda now, are you all considered Abayudaya, or is that the name for a specific group?
Oh, that's a good question. We are all considered Abayudaya, whether Orthodox or Jewish or New or conservative. It's all Abayudaya.
Thank you. I wish you the best, and this has been wonderful.
Thank you.
I would encourage you, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hands either on Zoom or in front of your screen. And oh, Sabra, please. Are you raising your hand?
Yes.
Or by coincidence?
No, I am,
Okay,
but
cool.
thanks. I wanted to make room. There's somebody who put a question in the chat and I don't think she got a chance yet. So I do want to ask you a question, but I wanted to make sure that she was heard.
Okay, thank you so much. There is a question in the chat. Judith asks, do you have contact with the Jewish community in Nigeria? If I may, I would extend that question and ask if there are connections between the various African Jewish communities, like with the community in Kenya or I know in neighboring countries.
Yeah, thank you. So there has been contact, yes, with the other Jewish communities. And when the rabbi came back from his studies, he came back in 2008, he established a Beit Midrash. And so there were young men, actually it was only men. I hope that young women would come too from Nigeria, two from Nigeria and one young man from Ethiopia and somebody from Ghana who came and studied with the rabbi. And we've also had one of the rabbinic students from the community go to teach as a student rabbi in Nigeria in one of the communities. I know that there are a lot of other Jewish communities in Africa, in Cameroon, in Nigeria, and Ghana, and so many other places, in Tanzania. But we've also had some contact with the Jews in South Africa, and we've had people visit and both ways in South Africa. Yeah. So that's mostly the connection, and I hope that it grows and we can have more connection. Recently, I think before COVID, there was an organized Pan-African Jewish conference that was going to be held in Morocco. Actually, no, maybe Cote d'Ivoire, I'm not sure exactly, but it was canceled because of COVID, and I hope that maybe the next year or so can happen.
Thank you so much. Sabra, we're listening to you.
Hi, thank you. The first person or people to convert in Uganda, did they initiate that outreach, or did somebody sort of proselytize to them? It's not common for Jews to try to convert other people. And I'm wondering how that happened. Was it, I'm sorry, I'll let you just answer.
Thank you. Yeah, so I talked a little bit about that in the beginning. The first person who converted had not met anybody else, anybody who was Jewish. They converted on their own. They just asked questions around. They were asking why they were reading the Christian Bible and asking why we don't keep Shabbat, and why don't we circumcise, and why don't we do all these other things. And somebody mentioned to him that it's Jews who do that. And so from there, he wanted to be Jewish. He said, if that's what Jews do, then I want to be Jewish. So that's how he started. And later on, he met, some other people because he wanted to learn more of like his new religion or new way of life that he had chosen to be. So that's mostly how it began.
We have another question in the chat box. This one is from Lisa. How will the Supreme Court ruling regarding conversion impact the community?
I think mostly people have just been frustrated and saddened by the decision. It also impacts a lot on young people who want to go and study or want to go and visit or go on matzah programs and birthright programs. I think those some of the fields where people are affected, but mostly it's been sad, like for the community. People have just felt like not I don't know what, like discriminated or and also, you know, not acknowledge like who people are going to be Jewish, they are Jewish. I don't think there's any doubt in people's minds that they are Jewish. They don't need Israel to be recognized to be Jewish. You know, the community existed even before the modern state of Israel was formed, and so I don't think that's the whole point, but it you know, it just feels kind of not right that other Jews around the world would be, you know, considered for all these opportunities, or even for visiting or for studying or for the law of return, and not the Jewish community in Uganda. Well, there has been the, you know, like the High Court and the case mostly about and emerging like a Jewish community converting on its own and being on its own, and that's been the biggest explanation for the Interior Ministry, because it's a community that chose, and it's an isolated community somewhere else with a group, a big group of people. It's not the same as converting maybe in the US through the Reform movement or the conservative movement. So we hope that maybe, you know, in the near future, that the community will be recognized, because it's very hard, you know, for me to be hard to just send away people who come to your door and say, we've been Jewish for 100 years. This, we have several Jewish schools, and we have all this, we have rabbis, we have a lot going on, you know. And I think one of the reasons why I'm frustrated, and a lot of people, is that they don't show an interest, or maybe they would come and see the community or something. It's just, you know, saying no at this point is not enough. And there are so many people who are advocating and pushing back, which is such a good thing. So we hope that things will change.
Yeah, let's hope so. There is a question in the chat box. Lenore, I would kindly ask you to clarify what court ruling you're referring to.
It's the Israeli High Court.
Thanks.
If I can, I'm sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand when I don't have the video.
Oh, I don't know who is speaking, but please go on.
Three questions, I think, if I can ask that many. What can, you know, what can other Jews do to support your community, especially given the discrimination you're seeing from Israel? What can we do to support and help?
Do you want me to answer that one first, or do you want to ask?
Oh yeah, please, if you don't mind.
Thank you so much. So most of the forefront people who have been advocating for the community are the Masorti, or the conservative movement in Israel, and also the Israel Religious Action Center in Israel. And so usually they reach out and post out things about, you know, petitions and so much more. And I think financial support to those organizations would be a great help, because the lawyers and everything, like my friend Joseph was going through the High Court, and they had to, you know, pay lawyers and all the things. I'm not sure exactly what we can do now. If I hear of any way that people can contribute or raise their voices or something like that, I'll send maybe an email to Armin, and maybe we can do something. But for now, I'm not sure. We have to wait for the communication to know what is going on.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you. If you don't mind, a personal question, what are your plans when you finish rabbinical school? Will you go back to your community there? Will you go to the community by your university that was starting up? Where are you going from here?
So my priority would be to go back to the community. I want to go to the community, mostly in the community that I grew up in. But Uganda is also very small, so you can, you know, travel from one place to another. And I'm hoping to work with the young people in education and as a rabbi. And we already have a rabbi who was also recently a member of parliament, and he's now also the full rabbi, but he's one ordained rabbi in the entire community with 9 different villages, different communities. So I'm sure there's a need for more for help. So yeah, so I'll definitely go back to the community, to Uganda.
That's wonderful. I loved the Lecha Dodi that you shared with us, and that is absolutely my favorite prayer. And do you think it would be all right in your community if other Jews, if American Jews used your songs in our celebrations? Would that be an okay thing?
I think the community would be honored. The story that I shared, that two people who came, I think the first time they came to the US, and they went to this Jewish community where they was singing, they had trained and they were singing the Abayudaya music. They were just so honored and so happy for that. You can find the music online. You can.
Yes, Smithsonian Institute has it.
Yes. And when you buy that music, you're also helping contribute to the high school, no, the college fund.
Good. That was the other thing I wanted to ask and forgot about. That's very good to know. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and if anybody else wants to get to do some other contribution, the rabbi who was fundraising for the college fund also resigned from his position, so he doesn't have the same network and connection. So if anybody would like any contribution, that would be very welcome. And Kulanu is also another wonderful organization. It doesn't only work with my community, it works with like 72 other emerging and isolated and returning Jewish communities around the world. And it also has a lot of resources about other Jewish communities.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Sabra. Oh, you are raising your hand.
I did, and then I was listening to all of these other questions and I forgot my question. So if there's someone else, I would ask it again in a minute.
That's okay. That's okay. Debbie, please, we're listening to you. We can't hear you. I think you are mute.
Yeah. Debbie, if you can unmute yourself.
Thank you.
There you go.
Okay. I am really impressed. I had no idea about this community, and I'm really impressed with you and with everybody in Uganda and the other countries. And I'm just so pleased, and I hope you thrive and prosper. And the music is wonderful. And I totally agree with you that you really don't need the Israeli government's acceptance of who you are. You know who you are and what you want to be, and it doesn't have to be official from anyone else. And I just hope you get all of the support you need and you continue to grow and thrive. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Debbie. I appreciate that. Yeah. And I just wanted to add that when the community did the official conversion in 2002, there was so many people had already been living as Jewish lives for almost 90 years at that point. And people, looked at it as a confirmation or just a way of connecting to mainstream Judaism, but they already people knew they were Jewish. They had been living a Jewish life before.
Wonderful.
Sabra, please.
I was wondering if any of the people who have been involved in the training of the rabbis and the teaching of Judaism there have been non-Ashkenazi. Like, have you had any Mizrahi help? Have you had any Sephardic help? Have you had any Ethiopian help?
I would say, I think unfortunately not. So most of the contacts and the first Jewish contacts, and also the rabbinic school, with more of the influence is more Ashkenazi. But I'm happy to report that we eat rice on Pesach, and and that's the only Sephardi part that we celebrate. But mostly because rice is the only meal that people can eat as a big celebration food, because one of the foods that we eat is plantain, and we also have posho, which is like polenta. It's made from it's a maize bread, and rice is the other. We always have a big community celebration for Pesach. Actually, I had never done a small family Seder before until I went to Israel like 2 years, maybe 3 years ago. That's when I first had my experience of the first, like a small Seder. The community tried to adopt this model and like maybe make, like smaller tents or like tables for families, but nobody wanted to sit with their families. Everybody wanted to just move around and just have the big set and sit with their friends. So we never do it again. It's always a very big community celebration for Pesach. But I hope that, throughout maybe, like maybe my rabbinics or any other, that we can have more connection with other Jewish communities. The Jewish community is always very happy and welcoming of everyone. We've had wonderful experiences with people who have come to volunteer in the community to teach Hebrew and to teach English and so many other things at the Jewish schools, and to work with women. There are several women's programs and projects. And so we've had really wonderful friends, and some of them are my long life friends right now. So yeah, the community is always really open to learning and to having the diversity that we can have.
Reza has a question for you, Shoshana.
Shoshana, thank you so very much. I really appreciate your presentation. I had the opportunity about 5 years ago to spend some time in Mbale within the Abayudaya community, as well as in Kampala, spending Shabbat. So thank you very much for representing your community. I was greeted so warmly. I also had found the music incredibly warm and inviting, and so easy to just participate in. I was wondering, can you tell us a little bit about how your community is dealing with the COVID virus right now? Thank you.
Thank you. So I receive messages almost every day from home, people asking me if I got the vaccine already, because I'm reading all this news about, vaccines in America and in Israel. The community, Uganda closed its borders and closed everything, workplaces, everything, like in the beginning, in the mid-March. And so nobody would travel in and out. So and they were very, very strict. So because of that, it affected a lot of people financially, but also the numbers of COVID lower than other places have been lower, and hopefully maybe they are still. There was a little bit of hike because there was a campaigns and presidential elections in January, which also, saw people, being together and so many other things, but we haven't seen reports of high infections so far. The community lost somebody. We lost one person to COVID who was actually the headmaster of one of the primary school, and he was a really wonderful educator and father to so many kids in the community. And we just really lost somebody very important in our community. But I don't have any news of anybody else having COVID or who has been affected, other than financial and other situations.
Mbale.
Kale Nyabo, Kale.
Do we have any further questions, comments? I see Debbie, please.
Debbie, you're still muted. Sorry.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, has the vaccine reached Uganda? Are people being vaccinated there?
I think there's reports that there's a vaccine now, but it's it's going to be also as slow as it is here. It's I'm not sure if they've already established how they're going to be distributed, and I'm actually, I don't know so much. I don't have a lot of information about it. Maybe that's a good question. I will also research for myself. Thank you.
And thank you again so much. I have enjoyed your presentation so much, and I've learned so much.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for being here and listening to me and letting me share my experiences with you in my community.
Thank you so much. Can we get a recording of this so that we can see the parts that we missed if we joined late or something like that?
Yes,
Is there-
after there's a recording is up on probably YouTube. We'll have it as an unlisted recording, and I can send it out to everybody who registered to those emails. So you will get one.
Okay, so I just want to say thank you, Shoshana, for being here with us today, for sharing, and for being such an amazing teacher and such a pleasant person in general, and answering all the questions. I learned again some new things, even though I thought that no, there's always more to learn. So thank you so much, and thanks everyone for joining us and for asking questions and for being here. Feel free to sign up for Haskalah's newsletter. You can always find information on upcoming events on our website. And let's keep in touch. Thank you. And Shavua Tov, and enjoy your week.
Shavua Tov.